Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's event. And as a reminder, it's called What's the Buzz? And I'm delighted to welcome both Tim Jennings and Tim Carroll, TC, to join us today to celebrate with us National Volunteer Week. And this year's theme, as you will remember, is the value of one, the power of many. And that really reflects what we do as Shore Guild volunteers. Each individual act of volunteerism, equating to 13,000 hours on an annual basis, makes a significant contribution. I know that today some of you joining the session are relatively new to the Guild. In fact, there are some who have not been oriented yet, and I hope to meet you on Monday in a bit more intimate setting. Now, today's session, it's billed as a conversation between myself and Tim and TC. But as you will recall, the last time that we met with TC, questions were encouraged from the floor, as it were. And we want to do the same today. So when you ask a question, to enable you to ask a question, go to the comments button or tab at the top right-hand side of my screen and click on that and then ask the question. And we'll endeavor to answer the question during the session. And if not, this session is being recorded, and we can do follow-up and get answers to those questions. What we'll cover today in general are the highlights of the year so far, including discussion by Tim about some of the results that we just discussed at the AGM. Talk about immediate or short-term plans, obviously focusing on the latest lockdown rules imposed by the province and how it impacts the shore. Talk about an outline of the creative options that we're exploring for this upcoming season and beyond. For example, the outdoor events that are planned. And of course, for us, what does it mean for us as volunteers? So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Tim and to TC, and again, welcome them both. Just before we do that, it's not lost on me that today is also Earth Day, and I guess we are doing our little bit by doing this virtually. Obviously, I'd much prefer it, as I've said before, to be in your company directly, but circumstances dictate otherwise. Anyway, over to Tim and to TC.
Hi, all.
Hi.
I think we're all.
Good morning, both of you. Welcome.
Morning.
Morning.
So, Tim, perhaps you could kick it off by giving a sort of retrospective of the year that's gone by and maybe talking about the AGM, some of the results, just to make sure that everybody kind of knows what the position has been or is.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We managed through 2020 remarkably well, comparatively speaking, and we're pretty darn happy with the overall result. You can actually watch the AGM; it's recorded on YouTube, so there is the opportunity to see it if you'd like. But and on the Shaw Festival website, you can download a copy of the annual report. If you type in annual report into the little search bar at the top right corner, you'll be able to get a copy and you can look at it. It's filled with all sorts of great photographs and statistics. The overall thing is that because we had taken out pandemic insurance back in 2015-16, we were more insulated than most of our peers from the amount of issues that everybody's dealing with. We took in about $24.1 million in income last year, and 90% of it went back out to employees and workers here at the Shaw. We were able to keep almost everybody on all year. In May, when it became clear last year that we couldn't rehearse the way we were normally doing or perform, we shifted everybody to a new program called ECOS, which was Education and Community Outreach Specialists. And TC and Kimberly went through the massive job of reprogramming 96 actors, musicians, creative people as new employees, summer employees, to doing a whole bunch of extra outreach activities that ended up with 862 education and outreach activities last season, as well as 65 live performances and 8 online performances to over 135,000 people. So we had pretty good results. The Shaw at Home website is now hosting 115 permanent long-term pieces of content. You can go watch anytime you feel like. There's tons of stuff on that Shaw at Home website. Go explore it if you haven't. Lots of things to do. I think that's all. I mean, that's the overall. It was an incredible year of doing and not doing many things. And I think TC and Kimberly, who started as our associate artistic director literally days before the pandemic shut down, I think just did a remarkable job of bringing everybody together and creating content that was really exciting for people to partake in. And I was happy that some of you will have seen in the federal budget that there is a call out to some funding for festivals, $200 million over the next couple of years for large festivals through FedDev Ontario. And that project, that $200 million, is actually based on the project we did with FedDev Ontario last fall with our concert series. They actually used that as the pilot to test to see whether that would make sense in the budget. So I'm excited that we helped out in that way, and hopefully we'll benefit from the future. We were named in it, so I think we will. Anyway, so we are.
Yeah, that leads me to the question, Tim, about the notion of government support that you've had. I mean, you've had obviously through the wage subsidy, but what I was interested in was that discussion in the report where you reference federal development of Southern Ontario and their specific help in those outdoor events. I'd be interested to know how that actually worked. Was it you put a proposal forward for the events and then they funded it, or was it they gave you the money and then you did the events?
No. It was I'm trying to remember, Tim, 6 months of me advocating with March through June. Vivian Zhao on our board and I met with the Federal Development Agency, Heritage Canada, all sorts of people to try to create a model for doing funding of activities to help generate economic activity here in the region with partners. The Shaw generates about $220 million a year of normal ancillary economic activity, so restaurants and hotel stays and all that sort of thing, and none of that was happening. And $250 million can't just go away and everybody expect to be well. So we were trying to figure out how to help the community. FedDev had not really ever done a major arts programming grant before, and so this was a new idea for them of how could they help and how could they use us. But they liked our economic statement, and they knew that Niagara-on-the-Lake was a really good case framework because we are such a powerhouse in terms of tourism. For a town of 18,000 people to generate 3 million tourists a year is unbelievable. We and Banff are the only two models for that in the country, and so this idea of how would we take that information and help use it to propel forward a larger economic case for the arts was how that helped. And fortunately for us, Minister Jolie, who's the Minister for Economic Development and Affairs, was the previous Minister of Heritage and Culture. So she got the economics of what arts does for the economy. And I think in this last year, it's really proven itself to be super true that, not only are we the second most affected industry group overall in the country, but we also are one of the major drivers of other economic activity, and all of those other economic activities are suffering without us. So it's something to work forward. So they gave us $400,000, $200,000 of capital, and $200,000 of money to underwrite the artists, and then we were able to use the wage subsidy with the ECOS team to take that $200,000 and basically turn it into $800,000, which is how we managed to run all fall. So that was great.
And TC, for some of the remarks in the annual report, you were very pleased with the quality of the shows that were put on. I think you said we actually pulled a fabulous series of shows. And I think how pleased you were came through in the report. So
yeah, it was a really good example of how theatre is the best training in the world, because you have to learn so many different skills. I really feel more and more as though everybody should spend time at school putting on plays, because you learn so many different skills. You learn to collaborate, you learn to get on with people who are not your sort of person, because theatre requires all flavors and sizes and mental types, so you learn how to talk to a very, very extravagant actor, and also how to talk to taciturn techie. And these are all really good skills, because it means that when you come to a situation like last year, the biggest thing you've learned through all of that is adaptability. You've learned how to trust yourself that you have the tools to respond to a new situation, because they're always coming up in the theatre. So it was very thrilling, but it wasn't actually surprising that a bunch of people like that could pull off something as beautiful and heartfelt as that, because it was really just recombining skills they already had. It wasn't that they were having to learn new skills. They could already sing well. They could already work together well. They could already curate and collate well and collect things into a beautiful order and work out how to present them. So they used all the skills that they've got, and particularly they used the skill that you have to have in theatre that you don't learn in TV or film, which is how to be open to an audience, how to trust an audience, how to show them your vulnerability and your warmth and your heart, and trust them to take that as it's offered, which, you know, again, I was thrilled but not surprised that the audience did that and really rose to that challenge themselves.
Yeah, I don't know if these are messages are connected. What Tim just said about the online content, you know, that being available, it's available to us, but it's available to them presumably as actors to see what they actually did through those, you know, those trying times, and produce high quality content. I mean, presumably they're good learning modules for them as well, or reinforcement of what they can actually do. So I don't know if you found that. I mean, I don't know whether your view, I know you say in the report that the potential for online communications like this, I mean, I believe that it will still continue in the future. I mean, particularly as today is Earth Day, and we're talking about not traveling to meetings, we're forced to do it from our homes. But in the future, we probably will continue having sharp meetings on Zoom or whatever. But the notion of online communications, you say the potential is enormous, Tim. Is that for other artistic ventures? I mean, I know you've not been particularly supportive of filming plays or whatever and then having them as content. I don't mean to misrepresent what you've said, but that was the impression.
Yeah, no, I make no secret of the fact that I think it's a mug's game to try and compete with HBO and Netflix and all the other people who it would also be very arrogant. I think it is kind of arrogant to think you can compete with people who've spent their whole lives mastering the screen and the techniques of that and how to make something really beautiful for it. I think it would be silly to go in and think that we can do something as good as that. Now, clearly, a live performance being filmed isn't exactly the same thing as HBO, but again, you think of how many films of concerts are really very satisfying, and they are made by geniuses. They're made by people like Scorsese and Jonathan Demme, you know, who made the Talking Heads concert film. So and they're not live either. They are a concert film that has then been edited for a year. So the idea that we can just go, yeah, stick a couple of cameras on it, that'll do, I think it's kind of asking for trouble. And it's also it's inviting people to think that we don't really value the liveness of what we do. And I think we value it more and more because of last year. There's no doubt that, as you say, we don't need to travel to every single 20-minute meeting, and we should I'm certainly glad to hear that, because my development department have been ruthless in sending me up the QEW to Toronto for an hour's meeting and back, you know, so now I can say to them, no, think of the planet. But the reality of it is that sort of thing does have to stop. We have to be more sensible about it. But when you're talking about traveling down to Niagara for 3 days of personal development and engagement with new people and new talents and new perspectives, there are some things that are worth traveling for, and humans are not going to stop traveling. So that's what we need to be ready for. What we can use the digital sphere for is to make sure that everybody who comes here has a real insight before and after into what we do and why we do it, and has access to us to talk to us about what we do and why we do it, so that their whole life can be involved in the shore, and not just for 1 week when they can get away from work and take the trip.
Right. So, Tim, back to something that you just said about tourism, economic factors, and being an argument for government funding. One of the things that you're leading is this reach out to the arts and culture and various other organizations in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Now, Guild members may not know that, you know, we're involved in that as well. They've seen us more in a more public way in the community through Lotta Nuttall, the ambassador program, and so on. But I think it might be worth you spending just a few minutes to explain to everybody what's going on in the reach out now broadly, and then focus back on tourism.
Yeah, I mean, the town is developing a tourism strategy currently, and they're doing that in relation to Tourism Niagara-on-the-Lake, which is the is co-run with the Chamber of Commerce here in town. Tourism Niagara-on-the-Lake is they call the DMO, or the organization that's sort of destination marketing and management organization, and I'm on the board of both of those, but also there was a culture plan idea put forward back in 2015, just before TC and I started, for Niagara-on-the-Lake, as part of this idea of a plan, a strategic planning. It never went anywhere, but there are so many people in Niagara-on-the-Lake who have employment or work in arts and culture sectors. About 14% of our population has some relationship to the art and culture and heritage sectors in terms of their work. And that's a massive number comparatively to the average of the province. So, it's really important here, and it's a big part of what we do, and why people come here is all of those things. So how that bakes into this tourism plan is a big part of what we're interested in the 40 or so groups that got together to talk recently. There's going to be a new subcommittee of Tourism Niagara-on-the-Lake that will be helping direct that information from those groups into the tourism plan so that it's properly represented. And I guess that's the easy way to talk about it, Alan.
Yeah. And for Guild members, it's interesting that the first meeting that I attended, there were other organizations where I know that Guild members also volunteer, and I will talk about that at the end as the summary. I mean, there is a lot of, we're almost like serial volunteers, as it were.
You are.
I don't know whether that's an acceptable term, but that's, I'm not seeing any questions so far. I don't know whether there's some technical issues. Yeah, I'm looking on my screen here, so it's not that people are shy. I think we may have some issue. Oh, there we go. Here's the first question, and I think it leads into the next section where I wanted to go. What's happening in the short term? How are we going to be involved helping you, or potentially? I know, Tim, you and I talked about this the other day about the outdoor events and how we might have a role, or at least learning from how you handle those outdoor events. But anyway, let's have a look at this first question. TC, you've had a chance maybe to read that. I don't know if you can read that.
Yeah, I'm good at reading. I did it without moving my lips or anything.
Amazing.
Yeah. So we actually will have about 60 ensemble members this year, or we do already. We have pretty much the full complement. We took a decision, did we not, Tim, to try to keep everyone on, in spite of the fact that from one point of view, the workload doesn't justify it. But on the other hand, we know that if we have them, we can then start to dream about outdoor events and stuff, and make sure that they are put to good use. Being actors, and therefore very energetic people, they don't actually want just to be here and being paid to do nothing. They will get quite antsy if that goes on too long. So we are cooking up lots of things, especially for the grounds of the shore. We want to really start to make that the star of the show, and in a way that it should always have been, and to set up events that are happening outside. I'm not going to announce exactly what they are, but I want to have a lot of fun and games out in the gardens, and indeed some performances, probably, possibly of shows even. So the requirement for us will be to have an ensemble at least as big as our usual one, and to use them to be available to do a bit of off-the-cuff entertaining if necessary. We've got lots of people in the company who have all these skills that they don't always get to use in their shows. So this is a good chance for us to sort of say, all right, go and do your Beatles songs, or come and do some silk work and acrobatics, or ride your unicycle around the patio and crash into people and cause lawsuits, you know, because we haven't got enough on our plate without. So yeah, there's I hope going to be plenty for an ensemble to do. The question of whether there'll be enough income generated by what they do to pay for them is one that we have decided to take a gamble on, really, because we think that there might be government support. We believe that we're doing the right thing, and in the end we have to hope that that famous old American football coach said, the scoreboard will take care of itself.
Yep.
And just for reference, thank you, TC. For reference, what I just said a couple of minutes ago, Tim and I talked about the other day that if we're not involved as volunteers, we, in those outdoor events, certainly initially, we can learn from them and apply how you do that in our two major fundraising events, which are both, you know, predominantly outside. You know, we will be operating under whatever protocols exist at the end of August for Sip, Savor and Stroll. And just a minute, a reach out to that team. Fantastic news to celebrate with everybody. The fact that the tickets were sold out within 2 days is a phenomenal success. And also to the garden tour, the fact that sponsors have stayed with us. In fact, we've got new sponsors. The gardens are still with us. The garden owners are with us. So, you know, that bodes well for the future. And we have to obviously talk about the practicalities of how we do traffic management for both of those events. And we will use what you do artistically, TC, to educate us how we actually do that from a management perspective. Now, I see there's another question, this time from Laurie. I don't know if you can read that.
Can you tell us more about the pilot to bring a few actors on as employees and what they will be doing?
Right.
Sounds like a Jennings question to me.
Well, it can certainly be partly me. So part of what TC was just saying about trying to keep everybody together is really about the, if this period of time has shown anything, it's the massive precarity of artists, especially as gig workers or contractors. Almost all actors and musicians, directors, choreographers are contract workers. They're not employees of a company, and they work through associations or unions as gig workers. And the big group that fell by the wayside to a degree this last year were these gig workers, people whose livelihoods are made, you know, job to job, who suddenly, you know, without any benefits or any immediate access to employment insurance, weren't able to. They've created programs now to allow them to get access to those things, but they weren't there right away. When TC and I got here, we started talking about the idea of some actors coming on as employees and having. We've both had a lot of relationship to teaching artists and actors doing other kinds of work in the off season. So when they're acting, but they might also be out in a school working with a classroom, or they might be working in the community on another project. And then we all know lots of our actors who also work as producers or work in other areas of the theater, work in box office, work as ushers. So we started to think maybe there was a livelihood here. And I started a few years ago talking with Canadian Actors Equity, the association, about creating an employment contract. One doesn't exist currently, and they didn't want to talk about it because it would have opened up a whole series of problems for them. This last year, we revisited that idea. They're much more interested now, and so we're beta testing with 6 actors the idea of a full-time, year-round relationship to us as employees. And so some of that is acting, but some of it is working on making videos in our digital studios, or teaching, or outreach activities, or Tim's got actually quite a list of, and each of them is quite unique. We jokingly call them purple squirrels because they're that unique animal that does all sorts of special things that you can never exactly replace. And so we're writing right now a brand new contract with Canadian Actors Equity, the first one in about 50 years. And if it's successful, and there's no guarantee, but if it's successful in being passed, will be the first employment contract for actors in this country. So it'd be kind of a neat thing. And offer folks year-round work, which will be great for us.
Yeah.
Tim, anything I missed?
No, that's it. It's not necessarily something that would suit every actor at the moment. We're limiting it to purple squirrels. In the end, it might be that someone is simply useful enough to us as an actor that we want them around on call, and it might then expand further. We'll see.
Interesting question just popped up, because I was going to ask Tim for you to share with the audience what you'd said the other day about the characteristics of potential patrons to show in terms of the vaccine. But here we go, and we might as well fold this one into this question. What protocols and physical changes can we expect to see in the theatres to keep staff and patrons as safe as possible? So in terms of safety, maybe we can start with that.
Right. Well, there's lots. There's a whole duty of care website on the shawfest.com. If you go to shawfest.com, and just look up duty of care. It's right on the main page. You'll see the list of about 40 things that we're doing currently. We became Canada's first cultural attraction to receive the World Tourism Association Safe Travel Stamp. So I'm excited about that. It meant we had to go through a whole series of protocols and submit our plans and things. I don't think there is a period this year where you won't see people gathering with masks on. Obviously, the protocols of the province are only going to allow initially 50 people indoors and 100 people outdoors, like that's the color code system. We think it will open up as vaccine rollout continues. We're trying to get prioritized vaccinations for the frontline workers, the actors and the ushers and people, in what they call group 2 prioritization. So that would be like retail workers and things who have to work closely with customers. We're trying to do that with the actors, and because especially the actors have to work without masks on ultimately when they're performing. Advantageously, the faster vaccine rollout, I think now that we're starting to see it finally catching up, is going to make that easier. Tim, you want to talk about rehearsal protocols or anything? Is there?
Yeah, well, we're going to do a bit of testing before we get together into rooms. At the moment, we're rehearsing on Zoom, but as we get nearer to when we think we can actually start playing, we'll test everyone, and we've had a great team, including our new COVID compliance manager, Alison Peddy, who used to be production stage manager, working on a system of journeys into and out of the building that will allow each team to have its own separate entrances and exits and all the rest of it, so that we can keep everyone as separate as possible. And I've challenged the directors to try to make a virtue out of the fact that you don't want everyone in the same room any more than you strictly need it. Of course, the problem with it is that the reason one eventually gets sick of rehearsing on Zoom and needs to be in a room is because it's exactly those big crowd scenes with 10 people around a table that you can't rehearse on Zoom. You can't get anywhere with it on Zoom. So, of course, to some extent, we have to be realistic and say at a certain point we'll have to spend half an hour working out the traffic on that. But when we do, it'll be with everyone in masks. It'll be as short as it can be, and we'll try and be creative about how to have everyone stand nicely spaced out around the space, watching one person run their track, and then that person step out and watch another person run their track. It could be quite fun as a sort of ballet to see how little you can put it all together before the last moment.
You don't face the same problem we do, TC, which is when we have EC meetings. There's 14 or 15 of us plus Cheryl's cat. So and we've got to the point where we miss the cat, Juno. So but it doesn't sort of upset our meetings anymore.
We have major cat issues in all my work. I mean, frankly, you know, we've given up really. Laura Hughes has left us, so we don't see her cat's backside quite as often as we used to. But others have rushed in to fill the breach.
Okay.
I had to close the door on this very call to my own cats. So yeah.
Tim, before we move on to this next question, can you just talk about those statistics that you shared the other day about the short audience and the vaccine take-up rate? That was quite significant.
So Wolf Brown has been doing this major study on the returning audience, basically, and on behalf of the Ontario Arts Council and others. And two things have become very apparent. One was that the Shaw audience is the most responsive audience to that kind of questioning of any audience. Stratford, the TSO, everybody is involved, and we quadrupled the numbers of anybody else's attendees in responding to these things. Tells you something about how our audience likes to talk. And then the other thing that was and you know, offer feedback. That's good. And then the other thing that was very interesting was that the averaging on the vaccines at this point, this was about a month ago, were about 3 or 4% of the audience had received a vaccine. And our audience, it was about 17% of them had received a vaccine. So clearly they're advocating on their own behalf. The other thing that was interesting was that of that we were seeing about 60% of people overall were saying they would return to the theater this year. Our audience, it was over 90%, 35% of them saying they'd come even if they didn't have a vaccine. So it was a very interesting group where, and the other 60% saying, you know, the second I have a vaccine, I'm back in the door. So we definitely have an audience that is desperate and wanting to come back and see stuff. I actually am more worried about the limitations on how many people we're allowed to have than I am about getting people back in the building. I think we'll be full up for every show we can have at this point. So,
right. Here we go. When do you foresee Guild volunteers assuming their volunteer roles? That's a pretty difficult question to answer, I would think, but
I would think about a month after we start doing performances again, and we've worked out all the issues, we'll probably start to test something with the volunteer corps again. But it will need about 30 days of our own teams getting used to how things are working. That sound about right, TC? Something in that range? I mean, it's a
good guess, not just as good, but much better than mine at this point.
Yeah,
I'm not running away. I'll be back in 1 second.
Sure. Yeah, so I would think about 30 days after we start performances. We are in the process of obviously, because currently performances are scheduled to resume on May 16th, and as you may have noticed, the stay-at-home order goes to the 21st of May. We are currently working through what that actually means in terms of further cancellations, but we'll be announcing that sometime next week. So.
And it's a bit of a movable feast. I mean, I know that Doug Ford had a press conference this morning, and it was going on just before we came on. And who knows what came out of that? I mean, I haven't seen that. I've only seen the banner headline. So,
I believe they're shutting down more kinds of businesses. So we'll see whether we're included. But yeah, it's they're very this last round of protocol changes was difficult because the stay-at-home orders negate all of the other color codes, and we've all created models that work around the color code. So it's a tricky, it's not easy to figure out exactly what the details are. Anyway.
So it's not a question from Mona Babin, but just the support. The holiday performances were so amazing. The connection between the performers and the guests was very strong. More than happy to pay for that. So I guess what we can learn from that is yes. I mean, I know I'm where we live here, walking around in the village, socially distanced, of course. People are, for the most part, have been vaccinated, and there is a real pent-up demand to actually become an audience member as well as a volunteer. So I mean, we're hearing that all the time, and kind of reinforce that. So,
yeah.
I noticed Mona didn't put a maximum limit.
No, I was just thinking a sponsorship opportunity exists, Mona. We can have that conversation at any point. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, more than that.
I can't quite see if she's still on the call after that comment. We'll follow up on it. I mean, to be honest, I think that we all feel that we are not only volunteers, we are audience members as well. I mean, you know, we
Absolutely.
miss it. And back to some of the things that you said early on, TC, yeah, we miss that live kind of connection as well. You know, like we said in the middle of March when we had our discussion, at least we're seeing some familiar faces through CBC TV, you know, and the like. But it's no substitute for kind of the real thing, as it were. I did have, the 2021 budget, Tim. You made a reference to it, and you seemed very pleased. I mean, I saw the Facebook entry that thanked a series of individuals, Justin Trudeau.
The federal budget, yes. Yeah.
And I know that when we last talked, you'd been wading through 300 of the 700 pages to see how it would affect us. But the devil's in the details, obviously. And I haven't read 300 pages, but the headlines. So.
No, it's. I mean, part of my job is trying to find all the things that nobody else is finding. So, you know, the things we might be able to make use of. I think there's a lot in this budget that could really propel Canada back quickly, and I think that's what everybody wants. If you look at the historical moments of, you know, 2008, after 9/11, I mean, you know, after these big economic downturn or problem periods, think people in countries that invested in companies that invested in faster returns and re-incentivizing the relationship built back faster and stronger. And so, you know, I think the idea for the country is, how do we get back to a more normalized period so that we can start moving forward? And, you know, we're all paying for this, right? This is our money. I mean, the government only exists on our taxes. So the idea of returning that money, a couple of years of that money to us in order to get us out of this more quickly, seems right to me. And I think all of the parties, they may have issues with specific legislation or programs, but I think everybody agrees with that thought process that we need to invest in order to get back out. And I find that very useful. I also think some of the training initiatives and ideas in there mirror some of our own thoughts about cross training and making life less precarious for people at certain places. The increase in minimum wage is a good example of that, for instance. So.
We have another question back to sort of live performance from Kim.
Yeah.
I don't TC, you can see that.
Yes, I see that Kim Mustill doesn't just love symphony; she lives it, which is even bigger. And I can more or less guarantee that there will be performances by Just the Shore musicians. The coffee concerts, which are a very sort of much loved part of the summer, will happen in some form, and we're hoping to find other ways to highlight the musicians. They're all very keen to play, and of course, apart from the wind instruments who do blowing and therefore have to be put a bit further away from everyone, all the stringed instruments and so on are very relatively safe. So I'd love to hear a bit more, a few string quartets and so on, and I think I can guarantee that will happen. I'm not making any promises.
The other thing that you might be interested to know, Kim, is that in addition to the 6 actors we brought on as full-time people, we brought on 1 musician. Brian D'Souza is now a full-time member of our embedded ensemble folks. So we're excited about that too.
Right. Now we I don't see any more questions. And oh, there we go. Oh, obviously.
That's you, Alan.
That definitely goes to you. And, you know, to be a virtual pat on the back to both of you, to you and to your teams. Obviously, I know that you've both been extremely generous in recognizing that as the theme of this year's National Volunteer Week, you know, the value of one, the power of many. That's personified by what you do, and I hope, you know, by what we do.
It is.
I think what we're finding is, I guess, people are champing at a bit for their lunch. Maybe, you know, it's getting on to, it's one of the highlights of everybody's kind of COVID cabin crazy life at the moment. What are we going to eat for dinner tonight? Well, it's now, you know, what are we going to eat for lunch? So, Sorry, go ahead, TC.
It is worth returning the thanks to everyone, not just for last year, but in anticipation, because when we do finally get our stuff together for the outdoor events, it's going to require the same sort of spirit of improvisation and adaptability and readiness from all you and your volunteers. You know, that the Guild will be as crucial to all of that as they always are, and on whatever level, you know, and in whatever capacity, all of that is to be decided. But we're very lucky that we can dream up those things and know that we have this army of incredible people ready to leap in.
Exactly.
Well, and thank you so much. I mean, I know in the years that I've been involved in the Guild, I've never known such, you know, a really kind of tight fit between ourselves and yourselves and this endeavor that we're working on together. So I'd thank you both so much for being part of our celebration of our National Volunteer Week, for meeting new members, even though you probably won't see them for a while. And I hope that they, in particular, have learned something today. It's great for them to put faces and voices to names. So thank you so much. And on behalf of my Guild volunteers, there's a virtual round of applause to you and to your teams. And thank you so much. And keep well and safe.
Thank you. You guys too, everyone. Really looking forward to meeting the new folks and seeing all of your faces very soon.
Thank you. And with that, I'll say goodbye to Tim and TC. And to you, fellow volunteers, thank you so much for your continued involvement with the Guild and obviously supporting SURE. And thank you for the other, as a Niagara-on-the-Lake resident, thank you so much for the other contributions that you make to a variety of organizations and institutions. I won't name them because I'm sure to forget one and upset somebody, so bear with me. I'd like to close by sharing with you one story that that I heard about yesterday. It involves at least two of our volunteer group colleagues who are currently in these very difficult times volunteering at a vaccination site. And I won't name those individuals. I don't want to embarrass them. And I'm hoping, though, that we can persuade them to share their stories of volunteering in that role in our next newsletter. They'd really personify what we try to do as volunteers. And I thank them and I thank you. And I look forward again to a time when we're all back together. But before that time, keep well, keep safe. Goodbye. Thank you.